what's up, everybody? You are listening to Nursing Uncharted, the podcast that covers uncharted territory within your nursing practice. I'm Maggie Reichard, pronouns she, her. I am a full-time medical ICU nurse and your host for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening today. Whether you are a new listener or an old listener, I so appreciate you finding us and spending time with us today. It is an honor to be the liaison between you and these conversations, and that's what nurses are, right? We are the liaisons. We're the switchboards. We connect patients to their resources and tie things together to help people. And being the host for this podcast for you, it feels the same way. So if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Audible or Spotify, wherever you listen. This episode is sponsored by AMN Passport. AMN Passport is a one-stop shop travel nursing app where you can find, book, and manage travel nurse assignments all in one place. You get instant job match notifications on the app, so if you're looking to become a traveler or you're looking for your next assignment, be sure to check it out. I am super excited to get into today's episode. Before we get started, we are going to TravCon. TravCon is the one and only travel nurse conference, and it's September 17th to 20th at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas. And AMN has a booth, and they're going to be giving away prizes the whole time. I'll be there, and I would love to meet you guys. So let's meet up. You can register at travcon.org to go. And if you're somebody who's like, who has money to go to conferences, by myself, TravCon also has scholarship opportunities that you can look into. So it doesn't hurt to just apply. It's going to be so fun. So I hope to see you there. So today we are continuing a conversation from last episode. I had the pleasure of sitting back down with Dr. Stephanie Hutchins. She's the owner of Serotinous Life, a company that helps individuals harness the power of post-traumatic growth. She's a certified life coach, a stress management coach. She's a former anatomy and physiology professor. She's the author of 2, soon to be 3 books, the first one being Transformation After Trauma, Embracing Post-Traumatic Growth. And last episode, we went through some of the tools that she highlights in her book that help people who have experienced trauma move forward in their lives. Stephanie works with clients who, come from all different backgrounds, not just nurses, but as nurses, we work in high stress environments, baseline, exacerbated during COVID. We experience trauma from our jobs that we bring home with us, and we see incredibly heavy stuff, and maybe we work in toxic work environments, or maybe we're young nurses that are experiencing a lot of anxiety and overwhelm about this job that expects a lot from us. I'm pointing at myself because I had a lot of that as a new nurse. And so it's important for us to understand how we can take these experiences and process them in healthy ways so that we can live our best lives. So Stephanie, it's great to have you on again. Thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back again.
Yes, I'm so excited for it. Part 1 hasn't come out yet. It won't come out for a bit, but I'm just so excited to share it, and I'm excited to have you here. We can continue giving people tools to help them in their practice. So
yes, I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yes. So in case you haven't listened to part 1, I would encourage going back and listening. There's so many great pieces of information in there. How we set up the last episode, we went through some of these tools. We went through a couple ideas, about why they work, how they work, and then we tied it into how it pertains to nurses. So we're going to continue doing that today, and go off of some of these tools that she highlights in the book. So the first one to continue our conversation was exercise. There was a lot in there about the importance of exercise. So I was hoping you could explain, why exercise is important for overcoming trauma, and then maybe we can brainstorm how it can be implemented for nurses.
Yeah, and this one is, I can already imagine some nurses thinking, oh my God, my job is so labor intensive. It's so physically demanding. I can't even imagine doing more physical activity on top of it. And so, because that is the reaction I get from people that have physically demanding jobs, is that they just can't imagine giving 1 more ounce of energy to physical movement.
Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah. So I guess I want to start with saying that there are many forms of exercise, and exercise doesn't just need to come in the form of getting your heart rate up, really high and
Yeah.
just, really pushing yourself really, really hard. It can come in the form of yoga and just other forms of stretching and just working on balance and with your body. Like there's so
Yeah.
many things. So before you start shutting down, right, the moment we start talking about exercise, just know there's many different forms of
Yeah.
it. And the thing with exercise is that there's a few reasons why it is so important with dealing with any form of stress, whether it's traumatic stress or stress from daily living or stress from, a difficult work environment. And one is, the way that exercise changes our brain chemistry and the
Hmm.
different kinds of neurotransmitters that are released. See, no, medications that target like depression and anxiety, they target, depending on the medications, a variety of different neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine and serotonin. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? Exercise can release all of these chemicals that these kinds of medications target.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and some get released in higher quantities the more you push your body as far as like
Hmm.
getting your heart rate up, but it doesn't take getting your heart rate up extremely high to cause a release of chemicals like norepinephrine and dopamine and serotonin. So you can
Hmm.
start to change how you're feeling just by changing how you're moving your
Yeah.
body and changing how you're breathing. And so even with
Hmm.
walking, walking doesn't need to be like your power walking. It can just be that you're out getting fresh air, and because
Right.
even then you're moving your joints and lubricating your joints and stretching your tendons and ligaments, and you're changing how you're breathing, and all of these things can benefit you
Yeah.
physically. And that's why I really encourage people to not even think of exercise being as something they have to do on top of their work. Like,
Yeah.
how can you incorporate it into your work?
Hmm.
Like, for example, if you're working really long shifts, then you don't even want to think about exercising on top of that, when you get home or before you
Right.
go into work. So how can you incorporate it? Like, can you take the stairs versus an
Hmm.
elevator at work? Can you go for a walk on
Yeah.
your break instead of just, and it doesn't have to be, again, a power walk, but go out and just get some fresh air and step away from the situation. So I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you think, Maggie, about incorporating these things into the workplace?
That's kind of, I was thinking about how exercise kind of takes you out of your everyday kind of focus. Like it's a break in your routine that you can be more intentional about your time. And so I liked that aspect of it, and I was thinking like, well, taking the stairs when you're on a shift, like maybe you're tired and you just want to stretch, like exercise is about moving your body in different ways. So like maybe, if you have a few minutes, you can just, be at the nurse's station and just like stretch and do a little bit of, I don't know. You don't want to get on the floor at the hospital. It's just
Mm-hmm.
floors are, oh. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of other things. I definitely have stretched at the nurse's station in the past and just
Yeah.
moved my body in different ways and like stretched my arms. Actually, there was one time I was doing that and somebody called me out on it. They're like, "Are you winding up for baseball or something?" Because I was like, stretching these, like moving different ligaments and joints that I
Mhm.
wasn't, that felt like needed to be
Yeah.
stretched.
Yeah. And even things like if you're on your feet a lot, doing an opposite kind of movement, like if you're on your feet a lot, you are contracting your calves, for example, and they
Mhm.
can start getting tight. If you're on your feet a lot, your calves can get super tight. So working on stretching your calves, and you don't have to be, you can be doing that standing, you can even do it sitting, of even bringing your toes towards your shins and just feeling the stretch in the back of your legs and on the back of your calves in particular. And if you're upright a lot, with your work, just doing like forward folds. You could do it standing, and you can even do it in a chair where you're folding forward. And so these are really important things to take into consideration because if you do have a physically demanding job, chronic pain is very common in people that experience any forms of stress and have high, physically demanding jobs. And if your muscles are already tight, and the more stress you're under, the tighter they're going to become with the fight or flight response. And so one thing that's really important to do, particularly if you are experiencing this kind of pain, but also to prevent it from occurring in the future, is to do movements that oppose what you do regularly. And so if you are regularly contracting a muscle, like if you're standing and walking, you're regularly contracting the muscles on the back of your body. And so being able to do things that oppose that, and that means working in the opposite direction. And so if you're always being upright, then the folding forward is an opposing movement. If you're always contracting the quads, then stretching the quads and moving them in the opposite direction. And what this can do is, again, help. Because what happens a lot of times, if you're always in these same positions, the ligaments and tendons will start to tighten into those shortened positions. And this is why it's very common to start experiencing back pain and things like that. And so that's why the exercise and things like walking can help, just loosen things up, but being very purposeful of doing movements that, again, oppose what you do on a regular basis. And likewise, you may also have a job. Do you feel, Maggie, that there are nurses, they may be in circumstances where they sit a lot, or do you think?
It depends on where you work. I mean, there are some nights that your patients sleep during the night, and that's great. And then sometimes it's a crapshoot. It's a toss up sometimes. Like ER nurses, like sometimes you'll have 2 patients that don't need anything, and sometimes you'll have 10 that are like very sick. And so it's really, you never know what's going to happen when you walk in.
Well, the reason I'm curious about that, because again, if you have a day or a job, like many days where you're sitting, on the other hand, your movements are going to be very different if you want to oppose your regular activities. So like if you sit a lot, the opposite happens from standing. Like if you sit a lot, the muscles on the front of your body start to shorten, like your quads will start to shorten, and like the iliopsoas, that help flex the hips, will start to shorten because of you being in that movement. So like if you're sitting, even for an extended period of time, it's good to oppose that movement. And in this case, you'd want to do a quad stretch, and you can do that standing. You can do a simple quad stretch that's standing, and when you're doing a quad stretch, it will at the same time stretch your iliopsoas as well. And so it's, again, trying to, and you guys, and again, I was anatomy and physiology professor, and I taught mostly nursing students. So I know you guys had to learn about these muscles.
We know
so
them.
I was like, you know them.
We know these words.
You may have to review some of them, but you know the basics of these muscles that I'm talking about. And so So just making sure to just move a little differently than you do every day. And this can help release tension in all forms. And then I like that you brought up, Maggie, about it changing our point of focus, because on our last session, we talked about meditation and about one of the the reasons that meditation is so beneficial is it helps bring you back to a single point of focus.
Mm-hmm.
And an exercise can be a meditative practice
Yeah.
because, and so instead of like, if you're doing some stretching on the shift, you're focusing on stretching the muscles in this case, or going on your walk versus ruminating over what just happened over the past few hours, or what, the storm that maybe you may be heading into in a
Yeah.
few minutes. And so it allows you to just have a distraction. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's what we need. So we don't just immerse ourselves in just this constant, barrage of stress that we can be
Yes.
consumed with in the workplace. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
mhm,
That's such a powerful thing to be able to disconnect yourself from your day for
mhm.
even just a few minutes. I think it just the overwhelm of relief I've felt before to be like, to not be thinking about this one thing for just a
Mhm.
few minutes. It's just like, oh, I'm coming up for air,
Yeah,
for like,
yeah,
and just remember that this job doesn't, swallow me, that like I have to, remember what I'm having for dinner after I leave work, or just, and yeah, I feel like exercise really helps with that, because yeah, you're forced to focus on something else, and then you're
yeah.
focusing on your breathing, or
And I'm
yeah.
going to say that exercise has been one of, with my own trauma recovery journey, exercise has been really critical. And that's why I did dedicate a chapter to it in my book, Transformation After Trauma, um, because there were so many things like it allowed me to do it. It changed how I was feeling. It helped because I've struggled with chronic pain for a very long time. And so, chronic pain is a very common symptom of trauma, experiencing
Mm-hmm.
trauma. If you're not familiar, so the listeners, I encourage you to read or listen to The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk.
Mm-hmm.
And just by the name of the title, The Body Keeps the Score, it says everything about how our body holds on to our trauma. And trauma is so much more than the event itself. It's how it lives
Mm-hmm.
in our mind and body. And one way that
Yeah.
lives in our body is it's in our muscles. It's ingrained, and we get these sometimes palpable knots we can feel from
Mm-hmm.
these extreme stressors that we've experienced. And so exercise, and so that's why in his book he covers, like, he's done a lot of research, for example, on how helpful yoga can be, for example, in trauma healing. And
Yes.
but it's being able to do these things that can allow you to release. So that's why even like,
Mm-hmm.
on um so there's another researcher, Dr. Peter Levine, that
Mm-hmm.
also he developed somatic experiencing, and in his work he talks about how one reason that our trauma gets trapped in our body is because we had an incomplete response to working through the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, he talks about animals, for example, about how they literally shake off. Like, if they got into a fight with another animal or a really stressful experience, they start shaking. And you can see them
Yeah.
shake. And what they're doing is discharging that stressful experience. But humans, what we do is, because we have this immense brain capacity, like far beyond these other animals, we get
Mm-hmm.
stuck and would never fully typically discharge our pain because we
Sure.
keep thinking through it. And we don't do these automatic kinds of responses that allow us to process our pain. And so where I'm going with this is exercise can be really helpful, especially like vigorous exercise
Mm-hmm.
where you are
Yeah.
pushing yourself physically can be really beneficial, because it's in many ways allowing you to work through and discharge, work the muscles in a way like if you were fighting off an
Yeah.
opponent, if you were shaking off a bad experience. And so, like, dancing and hiking and swimming and all these things that can
Yeah.
really allow you to move your body in ways that you weren't able to when you experience the stressful experience can really help you in many ways
Get that energy out.
discharge it and process the trauma in a way that you're not able to otherwise. And so like that's why like even if your job is physically demanding, what can you do in one of your days off per week where you get out and do something that's a little more physically demanding and get your heart rate
Yeah.
up? And so like I love hiking. Like I love being in the mountains and being able to prove to myself like how strong I am. And
Yeah.
it's like really invigorating. And so like thinking about these kinds of things that you can do that will be liberating to you.
Yeah. There was I remember during COVID there was somebody on our unit that spearheaded group exercise
Oh
for
yeah.
the nurses on the unit, and I thought that that was such a great idea because I feel like it kind of kills two birds with one stone. It's like developing, connection and relationships with your coworkers, but also, you're all, getting that cathartic,
Yes.
experience of getting your heart rate up. And
Yeah.
so that's always something, if you're looking to increase the community camaraderie on your unit too, like
Yeah.
maybe everybody keeping each other like accountable and like meeting once a week or something and doing a
Yeah.
group exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And the more that you can work together to be able to it because it means you're not doing it alone, that it's not just your journey, that because if you are doing it as part of a whole like something that's happening on your unit, then you're no longer
Hmm.
just doing it for you. You're doing it to
Yeah,
have a shared um like adventure activity, whatever it may be, with people on your unit. So you're building that camaraderie. You have something to talk about other than, the ridiculousness, of the shift.
yeah,
Yeah. And sometimes that's really great to build up to be able to join forces on something other than the bad parts of
sure.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, nurses, they can definitely get sucked into
Yeah.
to talking to, about our days and everything. And,
Yeah.
a lot of times, it is nice to be able to find something else that we can that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I would say this
Hmm.
is probably very common in most workplaces is that, and that's why sometimes you find that people don't really want to hang out with their colleagues outside of work because it always ends up sucking them back
Yeah,
in. But then when they spend so much time working, it's hard for them to develop the relationships outside of the workplace. And
right.
so being able to have something else that unifies you versus difficult circumstances will make it so you're not just constantly rehashing the things that
Hmm.
caused you the stress in the first place.
The next thing that I want to talk about, I think, is kind of like meditation in that I think are going to have to pitch it to people because when they think about it in their head, they're like, oh, that's not for me. But it definitely has its benefits, and that's creative expression.
Mm.
And I think so. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how that's helped you and maybe some of the ways that creative expression kind of encompasses different things. It doesn't have to be, writing poetry if that's not what you want to do, or So how have you implemented creative expression in your life?
And this is something that has evolved significantly during my lifetime, and like it will with others. So my trauma started at a young age, and before I could really articulate what had happened to me and what I was
Hmm.
feeling. And I was always a little artistic, so I'd like to draw, and but I also like to write. I always like to write from a young age, and so it started out in the form of poetry and
Hmm.
drawing, and then it evolved into painting, and then eventually it evolved into dancing. And why I want to share that is because, yes, some people are automatically like creative expression. What? That's a luxury. Like some people feel
Mm,
like spending time on hobbies and creative expression is a luxury that they don't have time for.
mm,
But the reality is it allows you, it's sort of like exercise in that it gives you a distraction, it gives you a release, it allows you to do something that is not related to what is consuming your life, in
yeah.
sometimes negative ways. And seeing this is the reality of any healthcare field, and very true of nursing, is that it is high stress. I mean, regardless of the type of nursing you're in, um, you're always being asked to do more with less. You're always being
Mm-hmm.
asked to cover shifts and do this and go above and beyond what even you feel your mind and body are capable of on most days. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like you've got to do something that counteracts, just like with the muscles. You want to do things with your body that counteracts what you're always doing on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. The same thing with what you do outside of the workplace is to
Yeah.
do like things that oppose what you're always immersed in all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why, some people say, well, I don't have time for things like creative expression. But actually, think about, like, just try it, because what could happen to you if you allowed yourself to step away from the things that
Yeah.
consume you and immerse yourself in something completely unrelatable that's enjoyable, and something that
Yeah.
you created, and it could
Yeah.
actually give life back to you. Like, what people a lot of times do when they have really stressful jobs is a lot of times they work on just fully decompressing in ways, like they'll sleep and they work on eating and watching TV and lounging, because in doing things that they think are the complete opposite of work, but then they don't do anything else that stimulates them. It's like they want
Yeah. Hmm.
a they don't want to be stimulated anymore. But there are ways that you can be stimulated that can be life giving.
Yeah.
And again, there are many forms of creative expression, and what works for one person may not work for another, and what works at one stage of your life may not work at another.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
about trying different things. And like you could
Yeah.
say, if you think like creative expression is way out of your realm of possibility, I encourage you to sit back and think about, what are things that you did when you were young? What did you
Yeah.
enjoy before the world started engulfing you into its priorities? Before you started worrying about making money and paying the bills, and what did you actually used
Yeah.
to enjoy? And see if you
Yeah.
can tap in to that again, because there are all sorts of classes you can do that are like super cheap. You can go to the
Yeah.
library, has classes, and community colleges have really cheap classes, and and you have even things that are a little more expensive, where you can go to like a paint and sip, if that's what you like to do, and paint as a group
Yeah.
and be taught how to paint. And there's so many things that you
Yeah.
can do, and just to explore something that
Mm-hmm.
once was interesting to you, once that made you smile, one time made you smile, and it could have been decades ago, but if you liked it once, you might like it
Yeah.
again.
I
Yeah.
think nurses, a lot of times we have like, we're very like right brain, Is right brain
Well,
the more
actually, no.
like
Left. No, left.
logistic? Okay.
Left is, they're more rational,
Yes,
logical.
yes, yes.
Yes, and right is the
I think,
artistic side.
yeah, we're very like left brain.
Yeah.
And I feel, and you need a little bit of both. You need that like
Absolutely.
yin and yang in order
Yes.
to like have balance in that way.
Yes.
And, but so for those type of people, I know, like, um, coloring
Oh,
with like
yes.
a, different like paint by number or color by
Yes.
number, like different coloring books. I've seen those on the unit
Yeah.
before, and I'm like, it's very, peaceful and cathartic
Yes.
for somebody to be able, like, yeah, it's in the lines, and like if you want to color everything, make it a certain pattern, like
Yeah.
go for that, but it is kind of nice to just, it's relaxing. It
It
can be
is.
relaxing.
It is. And actually, I think that's a wonderful idea of having, because they have the adult coloring books that can get pretty elaborate.
Yeah.
And then you don't even have to, you could just work on it over time.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and wouldn't it be interesting? You could have your own book, or it could be, it's a community book, and seeing like
Yeah.
who adds their different style and what do you get when people add their contribution to it? What
Yeah.
can you make together that you couldn't have come up with on your own?
Yeah.
And I really, coloring is actually something I do find very, very peaceful and relaxing. And that's why one I even have on my phone when I am having trouble sleeping at night,
Mm.
there are coloring apps that I really like. I'm going to actually open my phone real quick because there's one I found recently that's my new favorite. Oh, yeah, Zen Color. So I don't know if they have it on
Cool.
iPhones, but I know on Android.
Okay.
But there's many of these different coloring apps. And yes, you're required to color it based on their color schemes, but it's like a combination between like a puzzle because you're trying to find like, okay, where does
Yeah.
all the places that this color goes, but then you're also creating something in the color, the pop of color that you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing is just, it's beautiful sometimes.
Yeah.
And so you could even, if you don't want to color in a book, you could even get an app on your phone and color on there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
There was when I was pregnant, I was reading this book called Birthing from Within,
Mm.
and it was by Pam England and Rob Horowitz, and there was a lot about painting when you're pregnant. It was this book that
Oh,
was more about like rites of passage and kind of like the spiritual aspects of pregnancy. It was like a little more like woosah on the spectrum of like maternity books and information. And but they were like different. They were talking about painting or drawing and how, they would give you a prompt about like what your fears and anxieties
mm.
were like around birth and like how you see yourself as
Um,
a mom or what postpartum looks like for you. And it uncovers a lot of like subconscious fears that you don't know that you have, that was easier to name when you're like staring at it, like after you've put it on a page. And I thought that was really powerful. I had never, thought of like drawing things in order to like, you know, unleash some of those like subconscious things. And so I thought that could be, if you are interested in like writing, drawing or like creative expression that way, maybe like draw yourself and then like, draw yourself as a nurse and like see how those are different. Are there
mm.
differences between the two pictures, and maybe you'll learn something about
You know,
yourself.
and I'm really glad you brought up that idea because it's very much in line with. So I had gotten permission from Dr. James Gordon to include one of his drawing activities in my book. And
Hmm.
from his book, The Transformation, it's called. And Dr. James Gordon is a trauma researcher, and he actually recommends doing these three. This his activity that I included is actually three drawings, and you start with drawing yourself. Like how does the world see you? How do you present yourself to the world?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this activity was really enlightening to me because in the drawing, when I did it, I went to a workshop with him, and I had done it with the first time with him leading the workshop. And so I drew myself with a big smile and big bright eyes, and this is how I present myself to the world.
Yeah.
And then the next drawing, and you're only allowed to spend like 3 to 5 minutes on each drawing. So you can't
Mm.
like spend too much time. It's like your gut instinct, like how are you
Yeah.
feeling? And then the next drawing is how do you feel like most of the time? Like how do you actually feel? And
Mm.
so and for me, it was amazing for me to see this that I drew myself with tears coming out of my eyes and like little Z's for being tired and a frowny face. So just
Mm.
that was very enlightening for me to see, because I had never really brought that to
Yeah.
my conscious awareness. Like, I know that I always
Yeah.
present to the world that I'm happy and bubbly. And I know that on my own, I do tend to be more like, depression is something I struggle with. So being sad and feeling tired and lack of
Yeah.
energy, but just seeing that like these, like you're saying, like your real self
Right.
versus the nurse's self, I didn't actually notice until I put it on paper that the version of me that I present to the world is completely different than like what I see as like the real version of me that most
Yeah.
people never say. And
Yeah.
so he ended it with the third activity is how, essentially, how do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And so the third drawing, I was able to put that I had a smile, but it wasn't big, bright, and beaming. I had,
Mm-hmm.
my eyes were happy eyes, but they weren't big and, elaborate. It was just, I was more at peace. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like I was
Yes,
putting
that's
on
what
a
I was thinking.
show. And so
Right.
if you could do what you were suggesting and have like, if you want to go the route of like, how are you in your regular life versus, your nursing life, you could even have a third picture that sees which one, what do you want? Is there a version of yourself that actually is a meshing of the two? Or do you always want to have these two versions? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But that's
Right.
like these kinds of activities can be very enlightening.
Yeah.
And that's why even like journaling can be helpful, and like
Yes.
thinking about, because we never sit long enough to
Right.
just be with our thoughts. and
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so yeah, I appreciate you
I
bringing this
love,
up.
yes, I love journaling.
Yeah,
I think that that's one of my
yeah,
ways, I think, in
yeah.
creative expression. I use the Notes app
Oh
on my
yes.
phone. And if I'm thinking about something, if I'm like really toiling about something, if I put it down on paper, then it's out of my head and I don't have to
Hmm.
think about it anymore. And so, that has been so cathartic for me to
Hmm.
find. And then sometimes I'll just use talk to text if I just need to like talk out what I'm trying to say, yeah, I'll talk to text into the Notes app in my phone.
Yeah.
And then I feel relieved, like I got it out, and that, and like if it's like a conversation that I'm anticipating or
Hmm.
something with somebody, it's nice to I've like already kind of hashed it out in my head of like what my thought, I've been able to articulate it to the end, that point that I'm trying to get out. And it's, and sometimes I've written about my first code on a
Mm.
patient. I've written about certain memories that I want to remember,
Hmm.
that, yeah. And you don't, I've really appreciated that I've done those things after so long. Because you can look back and
Hmm.
remember them if you want to look back at them, or if you need to just like get it off your chest and never look at it again. That's also totally just as therapeutic, but it's a way to get it out of your body.
Absolutely. Oh, and Maggie, I am so excited that you do this, because this is something I do as well. And
Yeah.
I use Google Keep. What is the notes app you use?
It's just called Notes.
Oh, in
It's one
iPhone.
of the, yeah,
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 yeah.
it's one of the ones that it comes with
Yeah.
the software.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so like with iPhones, it's the Notes app, and in an Android product, like the Google, you'll get the Google Suite, and so Android, you have Keep automatically comes
Okay.
on your phone, and
Okay.
it works the same. I use it the same exact way, and I like using talk to text the most.
Yeah.
And me being a writer, it actually, a lot of my book development comes from using this talk to text, and I
Yeah.
just go on like blah, 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 like a little rampage on my notes app.
Yeah.
But I do the same thing if I need to, if I had an insight about something, and I'll title it
Mm-hmm.
like reflection, or I'll put a
Mm-hmm.
date if I want to remember about, like, or if I'm just like, there's something I've been working on, like one of my own personal struggles, is my eating. And so like if I'm trying to work through a particular, difficult time with, a bad eating habit, I will journal about it. And I used to journal with a physical journal, but now that the note-taking app, it's completely transformed that. And I'll put the date and then I just talk into
Yeah.
all the notes about the thoughts, everything that came up. Why did I do something that I said I wasn't going to do? And what was coming up for me during that time? And so that is a great way as well to like discharge those feelings and to be able to work through it. And that's really the benefit of journaling in general, is to being able
Yeah.
to work through a thought process and not getting
Yeah.
stuck. You know, it's allowing you to finish the thought process. And sometimes we stop ourselves with distracting ourselves with other things so we don't think about it. But sometimes if we allow ourselves to fully finish the thought, we can come to looking, we can end up looking at our situation completely different by the time we finish articulating it than if we
Yeah.
just stopped early on. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I like talk to text too, because you can just keep up with your stream of
Oh, yeah.
consciousness, like instead of just like, texting on your phone or like writing it out, like my brain is just going. And so, talk to
Oh,
text
it really is amazing. And you don't have to worry about your punctuation. You just keep going and it just
Yes.
records.
Right.
And I can be anywhere. Like I can be in my car, I can be doing dishes, I can be doing whatever.
Yeah.
I can be in bed not sleeping well, and I'll just turn the microphone on and I just start, rattling on about what's going in my head at that point. And it's a beautiful, it's actually, it is my go-to actually of all the things I
Yeah.
use to process what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
It is the talk to text function on my notes app. So that's
Yes.
awesome that we do the same
I
thing.
love that we're similar in that way. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that was creative expression. We did exercise, creative expression. So another one, the next one I wanted to get into is self-care, because I think that's one that a lot of people think about when they think about nurturing their bodies and trauma back to health.
Yeah.
So it's what was that experience for you, and maybe we can talk about how to do it in nursing.
And self-care is one that comes in so many forms. And to be quite honest, everything we've covered up to this point in the last session and this one really would fall under the realm of self-care, in that meditation and exercise and creative expression. But self-care is so much more than that as well. It can include massage, and it can include getting your nails done and hair done and cleaning your home and all of these things. Because I will say that, and I likely shared in our last session that there was a point, after I lost my significant other, that my depression got really severe, and I wasn't doing even basic forms of self-care. I was not cleaning my home, and I was not cleaning my body. And the reality is that, and it's a common saying, but or a common way of thinking, is that our external environment mirrors our internal environment. And so if your home is chaotic, if it's cluttered, if it's dirty in any form, that is because inside of you have these feelings inside of you. And sometimes people think that they have to first work on the inside before they can work on the outside. But that inner work of working on those inner feelings of chaos can be too much to bear. And yes, until you work through these things, your outer environment will keep falling back. So when you clean your home, if you don't, eventually get the inner workings done, your home's going to still end up dirty and chaotic. But what I had to do is, it was too big of a step for me to actually start taking care of me and believing that I was deserving of being taken care of. It was easier for me to believe that I needed to clean my home than to clean my body. for example, because I would go days and days without cleaning my body or my teeth, So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so one thing that I started doing was setting goals for myself about cleaning my home, like taking out the trash and doing the dishes, or having one section of my home that I was going to work on. And the reality is that once I started working on these little aspects of my outer life, it felt better. It like felt like
Yeah.
it feels terrible when you walk into your home, especially after a long day
Yeah.
of work, and it is utter chaos. So you just left chaos and now you came back, you're living in chaos.
Yeah.
And so when you can start to create an environment for yourself, an external environment that is, I guess, I don't know, make me more therapeutic, just more enjoyable, just less stressful. It can just lead to a greater sense of peace in your life, and it may
Yeah.
help you to start doing the inner work that's a little more challenging, you know?
Yeah, you leave space to do that
Yes.
inner work. I mean,
Yes.
after yeah, I feel like whenever I have more clarity when I
Yes.
can have a clean room,
Yeah.
a clean space. Like I hate coming home after I like to try and clean my house before I go away for a weekend,
Yes.
because when I come home and then it's just all I see is tasks and I'm
Yes.
just like I just want to lay down.
Yes.
It really, they are so synonymous.
Mhm.
I totally agree with that. When you said that, as far as self-care, I hadn't even thought of that. I was thinking about getting your nails done or
Yeah.
hair done or massage and stuff, but that is such a form of self-care,
Yeah.
is making a space for you to,
Yeah.
live in, having a clean space, and you have a clean mind.
Yeah, and it's even like, and if your whole home is chaotic, then work on one piece at a time, like
Yeah.
building your own little like sanctuary as far as what is the one room you want to focus on first, and maybe it's where you
Yeah.
sleep at night. I don't know. Maybe it's where you come. Maybe it's your living room, wherever you go to have downtime after your work. Like, if it's so chunking down what you're aiming for into bite-sized pieces, and we talked about that some last week,
Yeah.
is to just break it down. And so if you want to start working on your external environment, like your home, and it seems like too big of a task, then what is one space you can work on first? And I would pick the room that you spend the most time in, or would like to spend the most time in. And if the whole room is still too chaotic and stressful for you, to think about what is one section of the room that you can work on at a time. And it's going to feel so good for you to be able to eventually have a space that you can come into, that's you made it so it's
Yeah.
not chaotic. You determined, you control. It's like you're being able to control an
Yeah.
environment. And that is
Yes.
where a lot of our stress comes from, is all the areas of life that we have no control over. And by exhibiting control over your home environment, um, it can help sort of balance that out, that feeling that you have
Yeah.
exhibited this control. Now, what I will say is, if you live with other people, and especially children, just be
Yes,
prepared
right.
that your
Yeah, yeah,
sanctuary
that's true.
may not remain untouched. Okay,
Yeah.
but that may require some conversations with, and
Yeah.
boundary setting, and about, this is your space, and what are other people going to do to help ensure that your space is protected. And so just be mindful that I understand, if other
Yeah.
people live with
Yeah, that
you,
makes
we
sense.
have to know that your sacred space may be disrupted. So you got to be prepared
Yes.
for that.
Well, I was thinking, in talking about taking care of the space as a means for self-care, I hadn't thought about this before this conversation, but in applying it to, nurses, I think that a way that we could do this is creating some type of sanctuary for yourself and your coworkers, like your break room. Like maybe that's a idea for management on that level, but like having a space where you can actually relax, that you feel like you have a space that you have clarity, or you can take a step away. Having we were I used to work on a unit that had their break room was just beautiful, and it was all there was these massive big bay windows, and we were on like a higher floor, and so you could see like the mountains in the background, and it was just like, this was such a break from the day. It was like such a great way to have my 30 minutes and be able to come back. And I think about that, like I wish every unit was that had that that space. But yeah, I think that might be a good way to kind of implement this type of this umbrella term that we're saying, self-care, is maybe like working on that break room space.
Or even investigating, are there other spaces that you can like use as your sacred space? Like, and depending on the facility you're in, some facilities have a chapel space, and you don't even have to necessarily be religious to utilize the chapel, but a chapel. So that would, if you're in a hospital, most of them do have a chapel. And so going, where is a quiet space that you can go? And I'd like to, when I am working, so I've worked at many colleges, and I would always scope out. I would specifically go around looking for doors that I could open to see where people were and at certain places. And I would find like little places that would become my own little sanctuary, that I found that at certain times of day, nobody's in here, or this special place that nobody knew about. It's been a wing of the building that isn't barely ever used. It's a room that is dedicated, because sometimes, depending on the facility, they have a dedicated space like this and people don't know about it and they don't use it. And so it's just investigating, and even finding, are there rooms in your facility that aren't being used at a certain time because maybe it's only used on certain days of the week for certain procedures. Can I go into this at this time? And again, this will depend on the facility and whether it's a clean room and that kind of stuff. But scoping out, if it's not possible for you at this point in time to have your break room be your protected space, maybe you can go on an adventure around your facility and find out if there is a quiet space that you can find for yourself.
Yeah. I love that idea. Hospitals are a big place.
They're big.
They're probably, there's also a lot of people, but, especially at night, I think that you could definitely find, an area that you can just be yourself. Yeah. But like massage, also great self-care.
Absolutely.
Just having, like you said, there's all of these things kind of encompass like self-care, but it's just, taking time for you, as opposed to investing all your time in everything else that you're
and I think I know we want to cover other things, but I guess I just want to say that, some people, and why I wanted to talk about the part with like cleaning your space, is because some people think that self-care needs to be expensive. And it doesn't need to be. Like, self-care does not need to be expensive. But that being said, some people, they work so hard to make their money and then don't spend hardly any of it on themselves, so it's also, if like you want to get a massage, or you want to get your nails done, or you want these things, but financially you're hesitant to dedicate that money to yourself. It's thinking about, okay, then if that's really important to you, what can you do to make that work? So maybe you don't need to get a massage every week. Maybe it's once a month. That's something that you're going to do for yourself, and you're going to make a little, a little savings. You can either make it a jar, or you can make it an online thing where you dedicate that each day or week, you're going to put a certain amount of money that's going to lead up to this amount to pay for whatever it is that you want to do that's special for yourself.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just being aware of how much time you're not spending on
Yes.
yourself, and then making goals towards, you know, putting that little, or like surprise yourself,
Right.
just like pick a, you know, book a massage for like 2 months from now, and then you
Right.
like remember it, and
Yeah.
or like happily surprised that you have this
Yes,
extra thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. I did that on my, or I did that for my due date. I was like, oh, if my baby's not born on my due date, I'm gonna do something like, you know, nice for myself,
Oh.
and I'm gonna go like, you know, get my nails done. She ended up coming a day early, so I had to cancel that appointment.
Oh.
But you know, that's just self care.
Yeah.
It's good. Okay, I think we have time for one
Okay.
more. So I think, I don't know. I have, so there's a few, and if this is really beneficial to you, please, like I encourage you to read her book and the second book as well. And she has a third book coming out too. And so, but we'll talk about one more. I guess, why don't we talk about mindful
Oh,
eating?
yeah.
I think that's one thing that we have. I think it can be hard for nurses because we only have a finite amount of time to
Yeah.
eat. And like there might be a candy
Right.
drawer or like a snack drawer, or, you know, something, and you just feel like you need to keep your energy up in order to keep going. So what things do you think have worked, or what strategies can we implement on our
Yeah,
days?
and mindful eating, I've shared that, eating is my, it's my biggest struggle, even though I've done an immense amount of healing and I have a lot of coping mechanisms to deal with stress. I still, the way I choose to cope is by gorging myself on food, and sometimes sweets. The more sweets, the better.
Yeah.
And one thing that has been really helpful to me, in my lifelong battle with my weight is mindful eating. And there are many ways
Mm,
to practice mindful eating, and it can come in the form of just actually being purposeful about what you put into your body, and
mm-hmm.
deciding like what is what, make commitments to yourself about what you are, what you want to put into your body, and are there things that you don't want to put into your body. And I personally
Mm-hmm.
struggle working at organizations that have candy everywhere. It's a really difficult thing for
Yeah,
me,
me
really
too.
challenging. And so for those kinds of situations, I have to really, before I even go into work where I know that I'm going to be bombarded with candy, dishes everywhere, I have to like make a commitment that I am not going to, eat any of that today. And but also
Yeah.
have a plan. So that's where you're being mindful of saying, okay, I am going to be mindful of what I ingest into my body. And,
Yeah.
but I know that I'm going to face these obstacles along the way of reaching this goal. And
Mm-hmm.
one is, well, that candy jar I'm going to walk by 10 times today. And so having a plan for
Mm-hmm.
how can you meet that goal. And for myself, like I know, like if I'm, like there's certain parts of the day I'm more vulnerable, and in certain situations. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
commitment where I will, before I will do other things before. So I will take a big swig of tea. So I always typically have tea with me, and it doesn't have to be caffeinated. It can be decaffeinated, but I
Mm-hmm.
fast for 18 hours a day. So that's a whole other thing we don't have to talk about,
Okay.
but I always have tea because it helps control any desire for hunger, and with long
Mm.
fast. And so, and it helps me when I am feeling hungry, or not really hungry, but I have a desire to eat. That's a whole other thing. Like,
Yeah.
um, knowing the difference between hunger and appetite. And that's part of mindful eating. And a lot
Mm.
of people don't realize there is a difference between feeling hungry and just having an appetite. Hunger is an actual physiological reaction where your body is like sending out signals saying it wants to eat. So your stomach
Mm-hmm.
starts growling, and you're having increased saliva production in your mouth, these kinds of things. This is actual signs of hunger. Whereas an
Mm-hmm.
appetite is purely emotional. It is just a desire to eat. And what I have found as a personal trick of mine is I have found tea works very well actually for both for me.
Okay.
And so that is something I have done to help with that, to help with me stay committed to my goals, is when I know I'm likely to be vulnerable, I take a big swig of my tea. And just as a side note, I always follow up with a swig of water because the tea stains our teeth. Okay. And so I
Yeah.
always, but between the two, like starting with a tea and some water, you're filling your stomach. And so
Yeah.
you're giving your body whatever it's the sensations it needs to say, okay, you don't need to fill your stomach with something else. Okay. So that's one thing of being mindful of what you want to consume. And part of that may include planning ahead about what you're going to eat.
Yeah.
And this is really, really challenging for people who work a lot, is because if they're working like 10, 12-hour shifts, the last thing they want to think about when they get home is what are they going to bring to eat, for their next shift. And so I really encourage you to think ahead of time, is the meal
Yeah.
prep of what am I going to eat while I'm on shift on this day, so that you're planning in advance. And this goes both for people who are prone to
Yeah.
eating too much and people who are eating not enough, because I see the both. I see both people who get too small because they're not eating when they're working. And then the other side where
Yeah.
people are putting on a lot of weight because they didn't think through it and they're just gorging on whatever they can during the brief
Right.
moments that they have a
Yeah.
break. And so if you are
Yeah.
being purposeful about what you're going to eat, you can plan in advance and bring that
Right.
food with you, or know, like, okay, for this meal, I'm going to order from the cafeteria. On this day of the week, it's going to be too much for me to do meal prep. I will get something at the restaurant next door, whatever it may be, but
Yeah.
really thinking
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. We have, wonderful people that will pay for,
Yeah.
food for the unit, and they'll bring in like pizza or
Oh
donuts or
my.
something. And like, if I'm running around in a shift and I'm my like adrenaline is
Yeah.
up or whatever, I just like I will run in and just like
Yes.
hound a whole
Yes.
slice of pizza. And then, I won't even think
Yeah.
about it. But like if I take a
Yeah.
second and, like don't like lean into that
Yeah. Yeah.
desire, then sometimes I won't end up eating that
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah.
It's just taking
Yes.
a second to like think about that
Mhm.
decision instead of just impulsively going for it.
Yeah, and it's just being purposeful. And I'm going to tell you, there's
Yeah.
going to be days that and I do it myself, where I made a commitment that I'm going to eat a certain amount, and I go in, it may be at a workplace and they have the pizza and the donuts and the bagels and the muffins, and I may give in. And that's okay. It's not about beating yourself up,
Yeah.
but it's also
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
stopping for that moment and saying, is this part of the commitment I've made to myself for the day? And
Yeah. Like, do I
do I
need it?
need it? But then mindful eating is also about being present when you are eating. And this can be very difficult when a person's on their shift and they're gorging the food quickly because they only have a few minutes to eat. But sometimes and I'm prone to this, I eat so quickly that I don't even give time for my body to send the signals saying it's full. And so I will
Yeah.
take in
Yeah.
too much. And then a few minutes later, my stomach feels like it's going to burst because I didn't slow down enough. And so maybe it's about saying, like, if you are prone to overindulging, particularly on shifts where you don't have a lot of time, what can you do to slow yourself down? And you may not have time to like sit down and really think about every bite you take and really thinking about all the sensations, because that's about mindful eating, is also about just being mindful of everything when you're eating, to slow yourself down. But can you
Yeah.
slow yourself down by, instead of having a piece of pizza and a donut, can you just have the piece of pizza and then see how your stomach
Yeah.
feels? Like, is that okay? You know,
Yeah.
is there, and just slowing yourself down and saying, okay, before I take a second piece of pizza, or I do that, what can I do to, again, slow
Yeah.
myself
Let
down?
me get some water and
Yes.
like then see if
Yes.
that,
Yes.
just separate, give
Yes.
yourself a little bit of time in
Yes.
between that
Yeah.
decision and then, see how you feel. Yeah. That has
Yeah.
definitely helped
Yeah,
me.
and for people, and again, because it is the flip side, is that some people don't eat enough. And it's also
Hmm.
stopping if you're on that side of the spectrum where you're not eating, it's also mindful eating is about stopping long enough to listen to your body's cues. Like, are you feeling shaky? Are you feeling lightheaded? Is your body actually
Hmm.
sending signs of true hunger? And you're just trying to
Yeah.
muscle through to get through the shift. And if you're in that side of the spectrum, what can you do to always have something with you? So if you're barreling through the day, like, can you carry a bar in your pocket, and you don't even like, what is
Hmm.
it, it can be half a
Yeah.
bar. Maybe your pockets aren't big enough, you can't fit a full bar, but can you fit half a bar so that, in between patients or whatever, that you can eat something. And so mindful eating is like also paying
Yeah.
attention to your signals. So not just are you too full, but are you super hungry and you need to eat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean having like a snack
Yeah.
readily available to you, I think is a big thing
Yeah.
too. I mean, it requires that prep piece, but like if you just had, if I had just brought like
Oh
grapes
yeah.
and bell peppers with hummus or something, and I just had it at the nurse's station, like that would be so much easier for me to, I wouldn't just immediately go for the candy
Yeah,
drawer,
and I'm
that's
so glad you brought that up, because even people who are prone to overindulging in the not so healthy stuff that can be found in many workplaces, even if you don't prep a whole meal, there are healthy things that you can bring, that instead of
yeah,
turning to the piece of pizza first, that you make sure that you eat a few of your strawberries, or you eat an apple, or you eat a
yeah,
banana, or you eat whatever it is before you eat the other thing. And so,
yeah,
like, if you are prone to overindulging, you can also even keep the bar in your pocket. You can also do
yeah,
things that, if you know that you're going to be prone to eating something that's not healthy to you and not going to serve you. And
mm-hmm,
it's again about listening to your body and noticing, what are your triggers? When are you triggered to eat like crap, in ways that's not going to make you feel better? I mean, that's the thing. And we don't realize is that
yeah,
we hate feeling like crap after working so much, but then we don't pay attention to the ways that we are perpetuating these feelings. And a lot of it is by
yeah,
what we are taking
yes,
into our body or not taking into our body. And so a lot of it is like, if you're tired of feeling a certain way while you're working, or by the time you get off a shift, what are things that you can do that are within your control? And so some maybe
mm-hmm,
even be, okay, maybe you have an issue with soda, and so what can you do to exchange the soda for something else that might give you a pick me up, but be healthy for you, like tea, something that'll still have
yeah,
the caffeine but then have antioxidants and other nutrients in it. um, and
yeah,
and just doing these little shifts, and maybe you don't fully get rid of the candy right away, but,
mm-hmm,
and I'm not saying like you go cold turkey, because that's not going to work either. It's like, how can you swap out, one
yeah,
juice or soda with 1 cup of water, 1 cup of tea,
yeah,
swap out one banana for, a handful of little candies,
yeah.
um,
Like being aware of how it's serving you and
right.
then replacing it with
Yeah,
something better,
because this is the
you
thing.
know?
We get so wrapped up in how the world is not good to us. We get so wrapped up in how people have not treated us well, our coworkers, our bosses, our patients, their family, our friends. But we don't stop long enough to look at how we aren't good to ourselves.
Yeah.
And these things, like even mindful eating, is a form of self care. It's about paying
Yes.
attention to your needs, and
Mhm.
what good is it going to be for, you're working so hard, but what is it for if you're ultimately going to feel like crap at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the
Yeah.
year? And what are things you
Yeah.
can do to reclaim the bits of your life for you? And
Yeah.
some of it is, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
and I
go
think
ahead. Sorry, Maggie. Yeah.
well, I was just going to say, I mean, that's why this topic is so important for us, because I feel like we just go,
Yeah.
and think
Yeah.
about, all of our patients and everything else. And then we burn out
Yeah.
and leave nothing left for
Yeah.
ourselves. And so, it's so important to figure out what these tools, how we can implement them so that doesn't
Yeah.
happen, so that we can keep going and keep
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. And actually, when you signed up to be a nurse, you there was a reason. I mean, whether it was financial, you had a certain vision for your life. And are you on
Mm,
track for that vision you had when you went to nursing school? And a lot of times people will say no. And a lot of it is, how
yeah.
can you get on track with living more purposefully and not having the whole world guiding your actions? Because even
Yeah.
like you going in and guiding what you eat based on what somebody brought in for the day is you not being in control of your days. You're allowing the
Mm,
world to dictate the direction you're going to go that day. And when you start
mm,
like being purposeful about what you're going to eat each day, that is allowing you to dictate control over certain aspects of your life and not allowing the other parts of the world to determine the direction you're going to go. And those little bits of control that we can reclaim for ourselves can go a long way in making us feel like we have a greater level of control when we experience huge, amounts of stress. And that's really like any form of trauma we experience leaves us with a loss of control, whether that trauma was experienced in the
mm-hmm.
workplace, by a family, by a member, by a friend, child, adult, no matter what it is, it leaves us with a loss of control. And we need to be
Mm-hmm.
able to demonstrate that we have control in our life. And one way of that, to do that, is by taking care of ourselves in some of the most basic
Mm-hmm.
forms. Again, the way we
Yeah.
eat, the way we care for our home, the way we care for our body. And these just are basic needs. And when we can make sure that our basic needs are taken care of, and we take care of them ourselves, and we're not making it so the whole rest of the world is taking care of these needs, we can feel like we
Yeah.
overall have more control over our days, and that'll help ease some of these compounding stressors we experience in our life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. This was such an amazing
So I'm
conversation.
so glad I
Thank
could
you
come
so
back.
much for Yes, I really thank you so much for sitting down with me again and talking to me about this. And again, thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable for other people in order for other people to heal. It's truly an inspiring thing. So, where can our listeners find
Well,
you?
so my website is serotinouslife.com, and I'm sure those will be in the show. It'll be in the show notes so you can know how to spell it.
Yes.
And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and all of them. You can find me at the handle Serotinous Life. And and at any point, if you have questions on implementing any of these tools, just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help you figure out a way to implement these tools into your specific life circumstances.
That brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to Nursing Uncharted. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at americanmobile.com/nursinguncharted. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a nurse interested in traveling, visit americanmobile.com to explore the largest database of travel nursing jobs in the industry and the amazing benefits that American Mobile has to offer. Also, a special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraubin and Sam McKay, and Aidan Dykes for the music and editing. Until next time, take care of yourself.